is Annie from HoopSisters, and I'm going to show you how to do block E5. Okay, to do block E5, I'm going to be making the 8-inch size block. So I will need a 9-inch square of my backing fabric, a 9-inch square of my background fabric, a 9-inch square of one of my stash fabrics, which I'll call my fabric 2, and also stash fabric number 3 in a 9-inch square. If you're going to be doing the 5-inch blocks, those will all be 6-inch squares. Also for my stash fabric, I will be using a 4x4-inch piece of stash fabric number 4. If you're doing the 5-inch blocks, you will need a 3x3 square. For block E5, you will need a bobbin thread. You will also need your Vanish Light thread, which is a water-soluble thread. You will need a 2 matching thread for fabric number 2 and a 2 contrasting thread. And then you will also need a 3 match, which is my pink, and a 3 matching dark. And for my fabric 4, I will need my thread 4 matching. That matches my fabric number 4. For step 1 in block E5, I've hooped my battleizer, and I'm just going to bring it over to the machine where I've got my embroidery bobbin thread in the bobbin and just a neutral thread in the needle. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to have the machine stitch out the pattern onto the battleizer. So step 1 of block E5 is completed. As you can see, it stitched the pattern out onto my battleizer. I used a darker color thread so you could see it, but if you're using a light colored fabric, you might want to also go with maybe some thread that matches the battleizer. Now for step number 2, we're going to take our background fabric and we're going to fold it in quarters. And we're just going to clip just a little tiny hole here. And then we're going to lay our background fabric over the top. For our design, we're just going to make sure that it's evenly centered over the design. And I have water-soluble thread in the needle, and I'm going to just go ahead with the water-soluble thread and have it stitch a tack down to tack that fabric onto the battleizer. And the water-soluble thread will later, throughout all the stitching, be covered up with other stitching. This is just to hold it on the battleizer for right now, and it will wash out later. You can either spritz it with some water, but it'll dissolve with water very easily. There is the tack down stitch over the top of my background fabric, and I cut the hole in there so that I can easily cut through here. And now what I'm going to do is cut about 1/4 of an inch all the way around inside the inside of that circle. Well, here is my block E5 with the center section of the background fabric cut out. And now what I'm going to do is I have threaded the needle, and this is for step 3. I've threaded the needle with thread 2 match, and I'm going to go ahead and have it stitch out an embroidery motif. For step number 4 of block E5, we're going to take our fabric 2, and again we're going to fold it in quarters, and we're going to make a little hole in the center, and you're going to thread your machine with your water-soluble thread, which I've already done, and you're going to lay your fabric 2 with the right side up centered over the block, and it's going to stitch a tack down stitch. Now that we've done the tack down stitches, we're going to go ahead on the center and we're going to trim it. We're going to go ahead and trim about 1/4 of an inch away from the stitching on the center of it. On the outside, we're going to go ahead and trim very close, as if for applique. For step 5 of block E5, what we're going to do is we're going to put our 3 match thread in the needle, and we're going to sew decorative stitches. Step 6 of block E5, we're going to take our fabric 3 and we're going to lay it over the top of our block and center it, and we're going to stitch a tack down stitch with water soluble thread in the needle only. To trim the fabric for this step, you're going to trim up close to the stitching as you would if you were doing machine applique. Here it is all trimmed up. For step number 7, we're going to take our thread 3 match, put it in the needle, and the machine will stitch a stem stitch around the raw edge. For step number 8, you're going to place your water soluble thread in the needle only, and the machine will sew a placement stitch. For step number 9 of block E5, you're going to take your fabric number 4, you're going to put it over the placement stitch, making sure that you cover all the different areas, and you're going to sew a tack down stitch. Now you're going to trim very close as if we're doing machine applique. For step number 10 of block E5, you're going to take your thread 2C, put it in the needle only, and it's going to sew some decorative stitches. For step number 11, you're going to put your 3 match dark thread in the needle only, and it's going to sew some more decorative stitches. For step number 12, you can continue to use your 3 match dark thread, or if you want to, you can use your 2 match thread, the thread that matches your fabric number 2. It'll be your choice, and it's going to sew some decorative stitch in this part of the petal. For step number 13, we're putting our backing fabric on. I've already sprayed it with a little temporary spray adhesive, and we're just going to center it over the back of the hoop. And I have water soluble thread in the needle, and we'll put the hoop back on the machine. We'll make sure the fabric doesn't flop over, and it'll stitch a basting stitch to hold that backing fabric on. For step number 14 of block E5, you're going to have your 2 matching thread in the needle and also in the bobbin. And so let me get my machine threaded up, and I got another tip for you. Once your backing fabric has been added to the back of your hoop, there's a couple things that you'll need to pay a little closer attention to. If you have a machine that has an automatic thread cutter feature, you're going to have to turn that feature off. The reason you do that is so you don't have knotting and a little bird's nest and a mess on the back, because you want a nice, clean, pretty looking back. Another tip is to just bring your bobbin thread up to the top of your block and take a couple stitches and then trim it if necessary. And that'll also help with that situation, so you have a real nice, pretty back. Step number 15 of block E5, you're going to take your thread 3 matching, and you're going to put it in the needle as well as in the bobbin, and it's going to sew another layer of stem stitches around the outside edge of those flower petals. Okay, I'm beginning to stitch the stem stitch for step 15. Don't forget to bring your bobbin thread up to the top. For step 16 of block E5, you're going to take your thread 4 match, and you're going to put it in the needle and in the bobbin, and it'll stitch a stem stitch around the outside edge of that area. Don't forget to bring your bobbin thread up to the top so you have a real pretty back. For step number 17 in block E5, you're going to take your thread 2 match, and you're going to put it in the needle and also in the bobbin, and it's going to sew some more stem stitches. And we're going to begin our stem stitches, but before we start, we're going to bring our bobbin thread up to the top so our back looks gorgeous. Okay, our block E5 is all finished. Look how beautiful the back looks. Isn't that pretty? So E5 is situated in the quilt where it is an inside block rather than a block being on the edge where you have to sew the binding to. So it will be joined on all four sides by another block. So to trim that, what you're going to do is you're going to take your fabric and pull it aside. Your batting and also your backing fabric needs to be trimmed away right up to that basting stitch. So I'm just going to finger press this. This is where the finger or the trimmer by George comes in handy, and you're going to place the crimped edge of it right up to that basting line. Snug it right up there. Give your fabric a little tug, and you can use the edge of that as a straight edge to cut your fabric and your batting away. And then your fabric is all trimmed, or your fabric on the back and your batting is all trimmed right up to the basting stitch, and your fabric here is still waiting to be trimmed 1/4 inch away from the basting stitch. So let me just trim all the way around the block, and then I'll show you how to trim the fabric. Okay, so now to trim, grab my little quilter's ruler. You can use just a regular quilter's ruler, and where your basting line is, you're just going to line your 1/4 inch mark of your ruler right up to that basting stitch line, and you are going to trim it 1/4 inch away from there. And you'll do that on all four sides, and you're ready to join this block to the other blocks in that row, and you'll do that on all four sides. And that's what it looks like on the other side, on the back side.